Okay, welcome back. Why do I call this series of programs Living Eternity Now? It's because we as human beings, we are eternal beings. And even though presently we are living in time and space, when we pass on to the other side, it's a good idea if now you are living these eternal values so that when we arrive there, we're not in complete shock about what's happening. And something that I find very interesting is how our founding fathers, they wanted to live these universal principles even here now. They were completely fed up with the despotism that was happening in Europe, and they had high hopes that they could establish a type of self-governing existence in the Americas. And if we are kind of lost nowadays as Americans, it's because we are no longer consciously linked to what our founding fathers were about. What did they do exactly? What were their concerns? What did they establish? What did they establish that was so incredible that this new nation very quickly became the greatest nation on the face of the earth? We cannot lose contact with that. So today we're going to study one of the founding fathers, Thomas Paine, because he was an incredible guy. He came from England. He was a revolutionary. And, as I mentioned, there in Europe, it was already so corrupt. They found no way to try to establish a life that was free from despotism. And so he came to the United States. He lived in Greenwich Village of New York. And let's take a look at what he was about, because this is extremely important for us even today, maybe even more so today than in his time. Let's take a look. First of all, he was a pamphleteer, a revolutionary, intellectual. It's because of his distribution of common sense. He was the author of Common Sense and the Rights of Man, the American Crisis. Because of his pamphleteering, the colonists at that time, they decided to go independent, because up until that time, they were still linked to the King of England as a colony. And Thomas Paine was showing them the benefits of becoming independent. And he was the first to guarantee minimum wage, this whole question of earning a more just wage for your labor, which at that time was non-existent. So let's see more specifically exactly what Paine was about. Look here at the chart. It's necessary to reduce authority, that is the accumulation of power, to a minimum so as not to impede the liberty of others. Look at this insight. He perceived that if there's an accumulation of power in one place or one individual, then the people lose liberty. Our founding fathers, they took this idea of the Baron of Montesquieu to divide up the powers between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, so that one was always kind of checking the other in order to avoid an accumulation of power in one place, because they had this perception that if that happens, then the people lose their liberty. Now look, these other points are related to this. Look at number 2. It's necessary to impede the excessively greedy from exploiting the gullibility of the masses. How many times have you seen that? Oh, Americans, we're so great, we're number one, and the civilization is going down. Our lives are more and more difficult each day. And so there are people who, they exploit the gullibility of the masses. And Paine is saying, we need to avoid these type of people. Let's open our eyes and perceive the deceitfulness of those who want power. So there's this saying that's been attributed to various authors, but it's like this: the price of liberty is vigilance. Vigilance to really hold those who are in power accountable to what they are doing. We always have to keep our eyes exactly on what they're doing, and not the other way around. not they always spying on us, always knowing everything that we are doing. It should be the opposite. We must know everything that they do because they are representing the people. And in order to control the pathology of the human being, they have to be held accountable for what they are doing and what they are not doing. This is the price of liberty, vigilance of the powerful. This is our price that we must pay. But look, maybe this number 3 is the most important one. Look at this. It's necessary to prevent a dominating class of any type from perpetually remaining in power. You know, in Thomas Paine's time, these were families that were perpetually in power, like nobility, being passed on from one generation to the other. This is the definition of despotism. Do we have that today? You know, in our political system, the politicians rotate. But who is in power constantly? Do we have a class of people who are perpetually in power? Yes, the economically powerful, the international bankers, they are always there. And in fact, they dominate the political sector. And this is very dangerous. Thomas Paine is saying that it's necessary to prevent a dominating class from remaining in power. This is the definition of despotism. And we have this problem today, and we're not dealing with it because of number 4. Let's take a look at the next one. The people are obliged to rebel against tyrannical laws and against tyrants. It's not that we have the right to rebel. We are obliged to rebel against tyrants and unjust laws if we want liberty. You know, if you don't want liberty, you don't have to rebel. Just let them do whatever they want. But if you want to live in a state of liberty, then we have to rebel. We're obliged to rebel against tyrants and against tyrannical laws. There are so many unjust laws. We are living in an immoral financial system, for example, that is there by law. You know, we say that we are a nation of laws, but if a law is unjust, then as Americans, in the American spirit, we are obliged to rebel against those tyrannical laws because they take away our liberty, our freedom. And you can see here in the observation that our founding fathers, they based themselves in the experiences of their time, and also they were based in the writers of John Locke, the great English philosopher. And in fact, the French Revolution happened principally because of John Locke, and also Berkeley, Rousseau, Voltaire. So they were very knowledgeable men. And one of the things all of our founding fathers were very much worried about was the financial system, because they knew that these bankers were unscrupulous people. And in fact, they're mentally ill people. They want to control everyone, control nations through the use of money. And in relation to this, take a look at what Thomas Jefferson said about this. Look, this is a quote from Jefferson. If the American people allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Isn't this interesting, this insight? He already knew this. You know, the Federal Reserve, it's a very deceitful name because it's not federal. They're private bankers. The Federal Reserve is owned by a secret sect society of private bankers, and they loan money to the United States and to every other country on the face of the earth. That's why they dominate even our political system. You know, the problem nowadays, it's not that what our founding fathers gave to us to uphold, to take care of it, to cherish it. It's not that this is inadequate. It's that it has been dominated by the evilest of men. The economic sector, the economically powerful, have dominated the political sector. And so we have lost our liberty. Our founding father, James Madison, Let's take a look at what he had to say about bankers. Look at this. History records that the money changers, that is the bankers, have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. This is our problem nowadays. We need to deal with this. We need to get consciousness of why our nation is no longer functioning. And the solution is not socialism or communism. It's the fact that we are being dominated by despotism in the form of the banking system. And if you would like to have more consciousness about this, I refer you to this book. It's a historic book written by Norberto Keppe, the psychoanalyst, social scientist, whose television program I've taken these slides from because they are a scholastic study of the founding fathers of the United States. This book, Liberation of the People, subtitled The Pathology of Power, it's the first and best book ever written about the mental condition of those who wield socioeconomic power. You know, on the cover, it reads here, "This is the first study of the psychosocial pathology of people with power, psychotics who are impeding human development and destroying society. If we don't stop them immediately, we will witness the rapid demise of civilization." And you can find this online in PDF form. One of the theses of this book is that there's a great difference between political power and economic power. And if the economically powerful dominate the political sector, then the politicians end up representing the economic power and not representing the people. In other words, we fall into despotism. Exactly what our founding fathers fought to free us from. I'm Gilbert Gambucci, and this is Living Eternity Now. See you soon.